Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen calls me out for being pregnant to teach her daughter a lesson. After that, am I the jerk for humiliating a man and his entire family when he proposed to me? And after that, entitled mom can't accept that her 3-year-old isn't a prodigy. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen has to accept that her son isn't a prodigy.
But he is, I swear!
So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen calls me out for being pregnant to teach her daughter a lesson. Pregnant me walks into a convenience store and I go to wait in line behind a teenager and her entitled mother. I vaguely hear the mom whispering to her daughter and looking back at me, but just like any good city person, I'm completely minding my own business. Until the woman turns around to me and starts to point at my belly and tell me how I need to tell her daughter how embarrassing it is and how hard it is to be a teenage mom with no father for your baby. Wasn't wearing a ring at this stage, fat fingers. Or maybe she was just assuming that too. How my life is ruined because of what I did and how I won't get to go to school.
Tell her what mistakes you have made to get yourself in this kind of trouble,
she tells me. She looks back at her daughter and says, "You don't want to end up like her, do you?" None of it makes me mad, just annoyed. Maybe at the same time flattered because she thinks my pregnant self is a teenager, but more annoyed by the condescending tone of her voice and the audacity that she would confront a teenager like that and embarrass her kid. She has been done checking out at this point, but I guess was waiting for an actual response. I was fully prepared to ignore her, and typically I probably would walk right by and not engage, but pregnancy leaves you with less patience. I look at the girl and tell her that her mom's advice is pretty solid. You don't want to get pregnant as a teen. I'm sure it isn't fun, especially when some people are really judgmental and would be trashy enough to continue for it. But since I'm a 30-year-old, I upped my age a little, and was happily married, I didn't really feel embarrassed by it. Not as embarrassed as your mom should be for making a jerk of herself for assuming. Did a slight stare down at her mom as I walked past them and out of the store. My daughter is now 12, and I still laugh at this story with people. I wish I had a wittier retort, but my brain froze for a minute, even trying to comprehend what the lady was talking about. Am I the jerk for humiliating a man and his entire family when he proposed to me? I, 28 female, came from a very traditional Indian family. I left them when I came to the US for uni because I knew that if I accepted their help in paying my fees, they would hold it against me later. And I got a part-time job along with the financial aid I was receiving. I maintained low contact and didn't visit them in person until I was 26, when they contacted me on my younger brother passing uni. For the past 2 years, I visited them 4 times, and each time they've been talking about marriage, although I stated very clearly that I wasn't interested. They brought up kids and how finding guys willing to marry older women was hard. I said no problem, because I'm child-free and I don't need/want them to find a guy for me. January this year, I went to visit them, and they said that they had something special for me and that I would absolutely love it. The day after I reached their home, they said that they were throwing me a welcome home party. I thought that they were trying to fix our relationship, and I just let it be. They invited a lot of people, and it had obviously already been planned. An hour in, my parents introduced me to a man in his 30s, F, and his parents. So next thing I know, F goes down on one knee and whips out a beautiful ring. I'm surprised and angry at my parents for still trying to control my life and putting me in such a situation. I said no, but then our parents began to push my buttons and I exploded. I called him, his parents, and my parents lowlifes for trying to trick me and basically insulted their views, calling them disgusting. Told them to go forget themselves and I left. I packed my bags and went to stay at a hotel until it was time for my flight. My mom cried and begged me to stay and said that they had already paid for half of the dowry and ring. I stopped responding to my parents' calls and texts because I was done with them. My cousins and some old friends have been telling me that I was being unfair by being so rude to F and his parents. Thing is, they were in on it. They expected me to say yes and sent me a lot of insults when I refused to reconsider. They were humiliated, and in their tiny group of small-minded people, my parents were being ostracized for raising me. F and his parents were also humiliated because they were rejected by me. Am I the jerk for being so rude? I feel like I should have handled the situation more delicately rather than blowing up at all of them. Edit. Wow, I did not expect so many not the jerk responses. When I said that they were in on it, I meant that my parents had told them that I hadn't met the right guy and that I would come around, which is why they kept trying. My parents expected me to surrender all my savings and money to F, live with him and his family in India, procreate with him 3 times, and do all of the housework when I can't even make a poached egg. About letting me go to college, I told them 2 weeks before leaving for it, and I lived at my friend's house with all of my important documents because I knew that they would do pretty much anything to keep me from going. They called my uni and said that I wouldn't be joining. Uni contacted me and I cleared it up. That's why I didn't talk to them and declined to let them pay. For those of you who have told me to wear a faux ring, I'm engaged to my girlfriend of 5 years and my parents aren't getting an invite to any wedding. Thank you for your responses, and I am never talking to my parents again. Entitled mom can't accept that her 3-year-old isn't a prodigy. Last week I started a job as a teacher. Perfect ground for finding entitled parents. Here's some background to start off with. I teach English to children, and while the school accepts kids between 18 months and 12 years, my students are between the ages of 2 and 5. The school I work at only teaches English and has different levels based on your kid's ability, where the teacher can use discretion to decide if the kid can go faster or needs to slow down. Because of everything going on, the school also has mostly one-on-one lessons now, but because things are getting better where I am, the school also allows physical classes instead of online-only classes. I have this kid, we'll call him D. He's a 3-year-old boy with a local Chinese father and a mother who is traditionally Chinese. Where I live, English is the primary language of most people, though the command of English is a little skewed with plenty of slang. Dee's father could speak in Mandarin to his wife, our entitled mom. Entitled mom, however, could not speak any English at all and was Mandarin speaking only. This is where problem number 1 is. While I am local Chinese, I only grew up with English-speaking parents and grandparents, which meant I have almost no command of Mandarin, even though I studied it as a second language for 12 years. Once I was out of school, my brain wrung out any knowledge of Mandarin like water out of a sponge. I can speak it at a barely conversational level, but can't explain anything in depth. The second lesson D came for was also my first day working there. While I was briefed on entitled mom, as she had been the one to sign D up for the lessons, I was informed by my coworker that D's father would be the one dropping him off and picking him up. This was good news for me, because when we let the kid go at the end of our lesson, we take a few minutes to go through with the parents and guardians on what the kid learned, what they did well, and what they can improve on, along with any recommendations for them, like speeding up or slowing down. It's hard for me to explain any of that in Mandarin, so if Dee's father was the one coming to pick him up, then talking to him was simple. Unfortunately for me, that was absolutely not the case. On Dee's first lesson with me, entitled mom was the one to drop him off. He's only 3 years old, so we were doing a foundation class with him where we basically teach him 1 letter per hour-long class, how to say it and write it, what sound the letter makes, and some simple words that start with said letter. Given that that was his first time seeing me, he was almost entirely unresponsive to anything I said. He kept trying to go out and find entitled mom would want me to open the door, and when I wouldn't, because he couldn't just be running off, he'd try to shove his fingers in the gap in the door. He would not repeat after me or mimic my actions, and overall did not manage to learn much. I did manage to get him to say 4 words that started with the letter B, but that was about all we managed to do in that hour. For all my Southeast Asian people out there, you know how our parents can be. You also know traditional Chinese parents are even worse, and entitled mom was just horrid. When I let D out to go back to entitled mom, she was at first cordial, asking how he did in the class and what he learned. I explained to her that because this was Dee's first lesson with me, he wasn't as responsive, but that he did manage to say 4 words that I taught him. Now, during classes, we have 4 flashcards with the phrases they're supposed to learn, and we give these cards to the parents to keep in case they want to revise with their kid at home. I prefer to give these cards to the kids to hold to reinforce that it's their responsibility to keep the cards safe, plus it helps them develop their motor skills when they have to hold stuff. When I gave D his flashcards, entitled mom snatched it out of his hand and immediately pointed to the first one, bubbles, demanding loudly for him to say the word. Since D was no longer in an environment where it was just me and him, he clammed up and wouldn't say anything. Entitled mom saw that as my failure. Cue our first terrible conversation. You already know who entitled mom and the kid are, and we've got me. This conversation was in Mandarin, with me speaking in broken Mandarin. As a side note, I can understand Mandarin, but can't speak it. Another side note, parents aren't allowed to be in the classroom during lesson time. Entitled mom, what does this card say? Her son doesn't say anything. Entitled mom, jabbing her finger into the card. What does it say? When D doesn't respond, I get a death glare from entitled mom.
Why doesn't he know how to say it? What do I pay you for?
Me. Ma'am, since this was his first lesson with me, I think he was shy and we didn't manage to get far in the material today. I assure you that
What do I pay you for? I sent him here so he could learn English.
entitled mom glares at her son and demands that he say bubbles again. But he is entirely clammed up and just shakes his head. Me. Look, ma'am, you need to understand that it was his first time seeing me, and he's 3 years old. He was able to copy what I said during class and point at the pictures associated with words.
Then why can't he say it? Son, tell me what this card says.
Me. Possibly because we're no longer in a quiet environment where it's just him with a teacher. He should warm up to me soon within the next class or two and become more receptive to the lessons. I'm sorry if the class today wasn't up to your standards, but please understand it is his first time with me. Entitled mom snorts at my command, grabs D, and walks off. I share some words with my coworkers, mostly us complaining about entitled mom and my mentor confirming that she was just like that during D's very first lesson at the school with her. That concluded my first time meeting entitled mom. But oh no, we're not quite done. Now it's time for today's lesson. She was even more horrible this time. She showed up 10 minutes late, thankfully with D's father too, and released D into my care. Today, I taught him the letter C, including the words car, cat, cow, and crab. He was a lot more receptive now that I figured out that he was more into physical actions and was able to say all 4 words, plus match the words to the pictures. The class itself was fun, but releasing him to his parents was not. Since D's dad was around, I spoke to him almost exclusively. I explained to him that D was doing well and became a lot more receptive to me in my lessons, but struggled with the penmanship since he couldn't get a good grip on a crayon and had a very light touch, so his movements were shaky. I also explained that he struggled to say car sometimes since he mixed up how it sounded with cow, but D's dad was very understanding. I recommended he guide D in how to properly hold a pencil at home, and D's dad relayed all this in Mandarin to entitled mom. Entitled mom looked mad at me when D's dad mentioned to her my comments about D not being able to hold a crayon properly, but said nothing. The school also gives the kid the activity book to bring home, and D's book today had a page with a car drawing for you to cut out. My coworker had cut out the entire page so she could cut out the car itself with ease, and the page was colored in by D. Entitled mom only noticed the bit of the page that was still in the book and blew her fuse. Entitled mom.
Where is this page? How can you give him such a terrible book, huh? Where is the page? Why did you give my son something so terribly made?
Me. Ma'am, that page was cut out because there's a paper car cutout we needed to use. Here, the car's right here. I flipped the book over to the front page where D's messily colored car cutout was tucked between the cover and the first page. Entitled mom's rage subsided a little, but she gave me the nastiest death glare.
Oh, so he couldn't even color it properly. I wonder why I'm even paying you when you can't teach him how to color a picture.
Let me say, teaching kids to hold a pencil is not my job. It's the parents' duty, and if they only expect him to practice for an hour every Saturday, that's their problem. Sounds nasty, but it's true. At this point, I'm exclusively speaking to D's dad and barely even looking at entitled mom. Entitled mom has also gone back to jabbing her finger at the flashcards, demanding that D say what the words are. Entitled mom shaking the car flashcard in D's face.
Say it! Say what this word is!
D is visibly stressed, clutching his toy car and staring at entitled mom but saying nothing. I decide to intervene. Me, pointing at D's toy car in his hands. D, do you know what that is? D immediately flashes a big grin. Car! I clap for him and give him a high five, offering entitled mom a smile that only makes her scowl deeper. Pretty sure her muzzle lines and crow's feet are permanent now. I also notice that anytime entitled mom talks, D's dad looks at her with such tiredness in his eyes, like he's regretting his marriage now. I finish explaining to D's dad on my recommendations for him to practice his penmanship at home. He thanks me, while entitled mom grabs D and yanks him off. The school admin apologizes to me for even convincing entitled mom to sign D up, saying he knew she was going to be trouble during the sign-up process. I just say it's fine, pack up and leave. Now, 3 hours later, I'm sitting here writing this, thinking if entitled mom keeps her trash behavior up, she's going to end up with a son that hates her. Can't believe I have to see entitled mom every Saturday now. I hope she pulls D out, even though I love him dearly. Entitled mom is just going to keep making trouble every single week and find some reason to throw a crap storm. Sorry this got so long, and thanks to everyone for reading. Being a teacher is just a great place for finding entitled moms like this, and I'm sure I'll have something new next week when I see her again. Edit. I cannot let him down now, because it's clear he won't get the love and attention he needs from entitled mom. I will do right by him. Love you all. Update. Entitled mom can't accept that her 3-year-old isn't a prodigy. Part 2. The termination. Here's the cast, because today's show involves more people. We've got D, my 3-year-old student. We've got entitled mom, Chinese national, very traditional and stubborn. We've got entitled dad, local, very much a liar. We've got school admin, and the poor bloke that got pulled into this unintentionally. We've got coworkers 1 and 2. Coworker 1 is the manager of the outlet, while coworker 2 is a no-nonsense type lady. They're both very nice in general, but not so much to parents who try to exploit their newer staff. And we've got me, the clown that had to entertain entitled mom and entitled dad. Here we go again. First things first, entitled mom and entitled dad showed up 10 minutes late with D. I know this, and that entitled mom and entitled dad are both liars because I come in and out of the classroom every minute or two to check if my students are here, usually starting this routine about 5 minutes before class begins. Some parents like to drop their kids off early, so I'd rather be there to take them into my care in case they show up a few minutes early. When entitled mom, entitled dad, and D finally show up, D just starts to take off his shoes, get his temperature taken, and receive some hand sanitizer from school admin. This is all important because it proves why entitled mom and entitled dad are liars. School admin is always outside at the front desk to receive students. He'll bring students in if the teacher is inside preparing for class or tending to another student, since we're not allowed to leave any kid alone at any given point. If D had shown up on time, school admin would have brought him into my classroom, assuming I wasn't outside. He would also have done the temperature check and hand sanitizer when they showed up and not 10 minutes late. This proves to me that they were indeed late. Entitled dad, entitled mom, and I didn't regard each other much as I took D into my care. I just had him say bye-bye to his parents, a little trick I used to reinforce that now is class time. D follows me, his parents leave, and all is good. I go about my class teaching D the letter F. D's writing and coloring has improved a lot since my last post. I taught him the command push hard when he holds a crayon, so he uses some strength when writing and coloring. He was able to do his writing and very aggressively colored a fish, even though I tried to convince him to color the fox, french fries, and frog in his book. He didn't touch any of the other drawings. His reading and pronunciation of words was roughly the same. He could say fox and fish, but not french fries or frog. I don't expect much. Consonant blending is something we usually teach 4 to 5-year-olds instead, and the FR sound can be pretty tough for a lot of kids, especially those who don't grow up in an English-speaking household. Overall, the lesson was fun, and he could even show me how a frog hops and how a fox sneaks around the forest. Heck comes when class is over. The school has a policy where even if the student comes late, lessons end on time. You do not get an extension to ensure that your kid has a full hour class. If you're late, it's your problem. You do not get to push back other students' classes or the teacher's plans after work because you couldn't show up on time. I help D pack up and take him outside 5 minutes before his lesson ends, a protocol that gives the teacher time to talk to the parents and give feedback. When his parents aren't there, I suspect they're going to come late again, as they pulled the exact same thing last week when they dropped D off late and came back late, holding me back from clocking out. Coworker 2 is outside at the front desk as well, sending a kid off with his parents. When she's done, I casually mention that I'm probably going to be stuck outside for another 15 minutes. Me. Wish I could go back inside. I'm probably going to be stuck out here for a while. Coworker 2. What? Why? Isn't your lesson over? Me. Yeah, but D's parents are probably going to come pick him up late. They did the exact same thing last week, came 15 minutes late for class, and thought I'd still give them a full hour lesson. Coworker 2. That's not right. Let me call them. You don't need to extend the class because they're late. Coworker 2 calls entitled dad and lets him know that class is over and I'm waiting with D. When she's done with the call, she mentions to me that entitled dad claimed they weren't late and that I was the one who was late in receiving them. Coworker 2 already suspects they're lying since she knows I check outside for my students before my class even begins and tells me that if they try to keep me, to mention that I have another online class that I need to go to, so they'll buzz off. Coworker 2 goes back in and I keep waiting. 10 minutes later, entitled dad and entitled mom show up. D runs to them and gives entitled mom a hug while I start to speak to entitled dad. I'm about to give the lesson report so I can just finish up and go home when he cuts me off. Me. Hi, sir. Sorry about calling you. So today, Dee learned Entitled Dad. Hey, what was this about us being late for class? We weren't late. We were standing right here. You were the one who was late in receiving us. Me. I'm sorry, sir. I've been coming in and out every minute or so since 5 minutes before class began to check if you were here. I never saw you. I apologize if you were perhaps further down and I did not see you. Entitled Dad. This is ridiculous. We were standing here. No one came to receive us. Me. Sir, I can assure you I was coming in and out and checking frequently. I did not see any of you out here on time. At this point, school admin is coming back from buying his lunch. Entitled Dad stops him and admin looks very confused. Note that admin's lunch begins halfway through my lesson, so he was definitely at the front desk before and when my lesson began. Entitled Dad. Hey, you! You saw us standing here, right? We were here on time. The teacher failed to come receive us on time. Admin. Sorry, sir. I didn't see any of you. I would have brought your kid in if OP wasn't outside to receive you. Sorry, I need to eat. Admin excuses himself from the inferno I'm desperately wanting to raise against these fools. I want to just move past it, give the lesson report, and go home. But Entitled Dad decides he's not done. He has no idea what he's talking about. It was another guy who saw us then. Me. Sir, he's the only male staff we have on Saturday. You couldn't have seen another male staff behind the counter. But it's okay. I apologize. It's on me this time. I must have missed you if you were here on time. Anyway, here's the lesson report. I deliver my report showing Entitled Dad that D could write and was more enthusiastic in his coloring. Entitled Dad notices that none of the other pictures are colored except for the fish. Why didn't he color them? Me. I repeatedly asked him to color, but he just kept coming back to the fish. This isn't a bad thing. It just shows that he has an interest in one thing over another. He was also able to write better, even though I still have to push down his hand and guide him in using more strength when writing. I show Entitled Dad the book and mention that it isn't finished because I tried to focus more on arts and crafts to see if D would catch on to that. I made him a paper circlet with fox ears he colored in and was wearing. Us teachers don't have to make our students finish the book since it is our discretion as to how fast the class should go. Most parents prefer it so they can see that something was accomplished, but most parents understand when we explain that they weren't into it that day. Entitled Dad has very little reaction, so I continue and mention that the lesson reports are now all digital. We used to use a hard copy, a sheet of paper we ticked off and had the parents keep. However, we've since decided to switch to our online reports, so it's all done on an iPad on our teacher's portal and the parents are emailed a copy. As I'm clicking around on the iPad and filling out my report, Entitled Mom buzzes over to me and gets uncomfortably close to me. She's leaning over my shoulder to see what I'm doing, though I'm pretty sure it was useless because she couldn't read English. I also have no idea why she wanted to lean so far over me. It's not like I'm tall. I'm 159 centimeters, 5'2", and she's at least 167 centimeters, 5'6", and heels, so there was really no reason for her to peer over my shoulder like that. Once I'm done with the report, I turn the iPad around in my hands so Entitled Dad can read it. Instead of just reading it, he grabs the iPad out of my hands instead, almost making me drop the book and flashcards I was also holding. Entitled Mom snorts in contempt as I quickly grab D's stuff so nothing would fall. Once Entitled Dad is done reading the report, he shoves it back in my face so I can submit it. I pretend to be cordial, say goodbye, give D a genuine wave and a high five, and head back inside to grab my stuff and go home. I would have just left right then and there, but admin asked me what was up and to fill him in. I relay the entire crap show to him and he laughs, though he mentions Entitled Mom and Entitled Dad were probably lying about being on time. I mention that it isn't the first time they've done it, but the conversation moves along to other things unrelated to Entitled Mom and Entitled Dad. About 5 minutes after I've gone back inside, I say goodbye to admin and leave the room so I can head back to the classroom, pack up for my next teacher, and scram. When I open the door, I'm face to face with Entitled Mom. We're inside the school area, and she's in her shoes. Great. Sorry to the cleaner who has to clean the floor in extra time because one jerk wouldn't take off her shoes. Me. Hi, ma'am. Can I help you? Entitled Mom in broken English.
Yeah, go outside. I want to talk to you.
Yep, she said it exactly like that. Understandable, she doesn't speak English. I internally groan, roll my eyes at her back, and follow her out, where Entitled Dad and D are standing. I go up to Entitled Dad and ask what I can do for him, and then comes the phrase that made me thrive. No, not asking to see the manager. Entitled Dad.
I want to terminate D's classes.
Bingo! As much as I love D, I cannot handle his parents. And for the record, I never once suggested they terminate classes. This was purely out of their own choice, as I've been nothing but cordial, if not pleasant to them. Me. I'll bring admin out to see you through the process. I head back inside and tell admin, who's still eating his lunch. Sorry man, hope I didn't interrupt your pinto bean quinoa salad time, that entitled dad and entitled mom want to cancel these classes. He stares at me and tells me to tell coworker 1 since he isn't really authorized to cancel classes. I go to coworker 1 and tell her about it. Me. Hey, coworker 1, entitled dad wants to cancel these classes. Coworker 1. Really? Why? Whose student is that? Me. Mine. I don't know. I guess they've had enough of me. Coworker 1 goes outside to talk to entitled mom and entitled dad while I go back into my classroom to pack up. I hang around, texting my mom about it all before finally grabbing my bag and leaving. As I'm out of my classroom, coworker 2 asks how it went. I tell her all about it, and her disdain for entitled dad and entitled mom is clear as a cloudless day. Coworker 1 comes back inside and looks to coworker 2. She says, Coworker 2, please come help me. Worker 2. Why? Worker 1. Entitled dad wants to terminate classes for D, but this is only his 5th lesson. He wants a full refund back. Coworker 2. Didn't the contract they signed say that fees are non-refundable? Do you want me to come help you? Did you tell them that you're the manager? Worker 1. I just say I'm a teacher. OP, who did you say I was? Me. I didn't tell them anything. I said I'd find the admin to start the process, went to admin, and he told me to find you, so I came to you. Worker 1. Oh, okay, good. Worker 2. Aren't they aware that most students don't adjust for a few months? So what if the kid can't read perfectly? He's going to need some time to pick up. Worker 1. I told them that, but they were adamant about terminating classes. Just come out here and help me. Worker 2 in her big mama voice. All right, I got this. Worker 2 goes out to the front desk. I ask Worker 1 what went on outside, and she tells me entitled dad and entitled mom were demanding a full refund even for the classes they already had. I'd understand wanting a refund for the classes they paid for but didn't have, but demanding a refund for the ones they had? Typical. I asked coworker 1 to keep me updated on whether entitled dad and entitled mom terminate classes, and that if they do, to let me know if a Sunday 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. class opens up so I don't lose out on my pay. I grab my stuff, shove my earpieces in, and go home. So far, I haven't heard from coworker 1 over text yet. At least, if they don't terminate classes, they'll at least request a new teacher. I love D very much, but his parents drive me crazy. Seems like they drive just about every other teacher crazy too. I'll leave an update in the comments on whether D's classes are terminated or if they find another teacher. Thanks for reading, and please never be like this. Update. Coworker 1 called me to ask how things were. D's course has been terminated, but the school is trying to convince entitled mom and entitled dad to come back. If they do, they'll receive a different teacher. So I don't need to interact with entitled mom and entitled dad anymore. Jerk manager gets his comeuppance. Entirely too many years ago, I started to work at a fast food company. Let's call it Southern State Not Baked Poultry. Southern State Not Baked Poultry wasn't a bad first job. I was 16, and the assistant manager at that location was my best friend's stepdad, so we took what was tedious and menial and tried to make it fun. He was actually a really good manager and genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. We would do silly stuff before the store opened while we were doing prep. We would have music playing loudly from his office. As long as everything got done and done well, he really didn't care if we had fun doing it. We'll call him Larry. This story is not about him though. This story is about our store manager. We'll call him Tim. Tim was the exact opposite of our assistant manager. Everything had to be taken seriously. Fun was outlawed. I genuinely hated working with Tim. Tim was an egocentric, power-hungry, petty little man with delusions of grandeur because he was a manager for Southern State Not Baked Poultry. Tim's approach to managing was to work the employees until they burned out. When they did, fire them and hire someone else. Needless to say, morale when Tim worked was in the garbage. Tim hated that crews would prefer working with Larry instead of him. He hated that crews had fun when Larry was working. He hated that our store's numbers were always better when Larry worked. Mostly, he just hated everyone. But one thing that he absolutely hated was a silly little thing Larry did. If it was before the restaurant opened, he would stick his tongue between his teeth and lower lip and shout out a "Hi, name" to whichever employee had just walked in. It sounded absolutely ridiculous. I would always do the same thing back, which ended up sounding like, "Hi, Larry." A perfect example of what a jerk Tim was is this. There was a young lady who, due to a variety of stressors, hurt herself after a particularly grueling shift working with Tim. After she had recovered, she came back for her last paycheck and Larry was working. Not a coincidence. She called the store to find out what day he was working. So Larry set her down in the lobby, bought her lunch, brought her last check out, and sat and talked with her for about an hour. It was after the lunch rush and he had the time, so he made sure she was doing okay now, talked about whatever she wanted to talk about. By the time she left, she was smiling, but had tears on her cheeks. She had never had someone just sit and listen and let her talk about anything that was going on. Well, the next day, Tim had come in and hauled Larry into the office. His words, and I quote them exactly, because the office was a tiny little cube with no ceiling, just a place to stash paperwork and a computer, were, "The next time she comes in, tell her to do it right next time." So now you have a clear picture of exactly how petty and vindictive this little man was. Here is where the revenge starts. We were scheduled to have the regional and national bigwigs for Southern State Not Baked Poultry come through our area for an annual inspection. Tim had his eyes set on being one of those bigwigs, at least for the region. Why wouldn't he be? He did everything by the book. That automatically made him a good manager, at least in his eyes. Everything had a checklist and a procedure and a set of written instructions in the book. And if you couldn't meet the expectations set forth in the book, well, Tim would yell at you. Because that's how a manager manages, you see. Well, before the bigwigs got to our store, we knew what day they would be coming. Several of us had agreed that on the day they came through, we would all mess up just enough to get Tim to blow his cool. Because our regional manager and the national bigwigs all believed that Southern State Not Baked Poultry was a family company and that employees were valuable team members. The day in question arrived and the bigwigs were there for their big tour. Whoops, one of the fryers hadn't had the oil replaced last night. Oh look, the shaker table hasn't been cleaned. Darn it, we've got way too much coleslaw made up and we won't get through it before we have to toss it. Crap, we don't have enough poultry in the cooker to fulfill the lunch rush. Man, someone forgot to preheat the second cooker. You get the picture. After the second time I took a minute too long to get a basket of poultry into the cooker, Tim absolutely lost his crap. Yelling, throwing things. He actually physically pushed me away from the breading station in the middle of the lunch rush, while the regional manager and several bigwigs from National stood there. While we had a line several people deep at both cash registers and a lobby full of people eating, Tim stood there, gulping like a fish. His mouth was moving like he was trying to say something, but no sounds were coming out. The room was absolutely quiet other than the beeping of a fryer that was done. I looked at Tim. This was the moment we had all been gearing up for. I looked down at where he had pushed me, a set of handprints and flour on my chest, and I cut loose into him. Yelled at him that I quit, took off my apron and threw it at him. Told him I was tired of his crap, of his poor management, of how he single-handedly drove morale through the floor every time he walked through the doors, how he was a crappy excuse for a manager, and that if he didn't have Larry and a couple of good shift leads, he'd have driven the location out of business a long time ago. All the color drained from his face, and he bolted to the office cube. The national and regional folks ended up comping everyone's meals that were in the restaurant. Interestingly enough, Tim was not fired, but he was demoted to assistant manager. Larry was promoted to manager. About 10 years later, I was working at my current job as an EMT. We had just dropped a patient off at the hospital that was across the street from the same restaurant, and my partner was hungry, so we drove across the street and pulled in. Now, I hadn't set foot in that restaurant since the day I had quit, but lo and behold, who was working the counter but Tim himself, and his name tag still shows assistant manager. The restaurant was empty since it was between lunch and dinner time, and I just couldn't help myself. I stuck my tongue between my teeth and lower lip, and as loud as I could, shouted out, "Hi, Tim!" Haven't been back there since, but this was around 12 years ago. I'm willing to bet he's still just the assistant manager there. Please come watch this video next, you will love it.
And huge shout out to our newest channel member, The Dragon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Join as a channel member today and we'll give you a special shout out in our next video. And to have us make any kind of video you'd like us to, come visit us on Fiverr, link pinned in the comments below.